it's really important that you just find what works for you. And so some people are like, I don't want to meditate. And I'm like, that's fine. Meditating doesn't necessarily mean that you're sitting, with no music and nothing and just sitting with your thoughts. Like you can do it, make it work for you. You can go for like a mindful walk or sit outside or dance or do something. Like it looks different for everybody. So I just
Yeah.
want to say that just if you're listening and
Mm.
you're like, I don't like meditating. Well, you can make it work for
Yeah.
you.
Welcome to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. Hi, I'm Janine Wolf, and I'm your colleague down the hall. I have a passion for helping fellow therapists get the clinical and collegial support we all need to do this work. And wow, it just keeps getting harder every day. I'm the founder and facilitator of the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. I have been a social worker for almost 30 years, and I own a successful solo online private practice. More of us than ever are practicing in solo or online practices, and we all need colleagues to process cases with, commiserate with on those really hard days, and also to celebrate our successes with. In this podcast, I'll bring you insights about trends and changes in our field and sit down with amazing therapists who are doing amazing work. We'll discuss fictionalized cases, ways to practice sustainably, and of course, there will be plenty of laughing. I love laughing with friends. I'm so glad to have you as one of my colleagues down the hall. Hello, everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Janine Wolf, joined today by my new friend, Gabrielle Juliano-Villani. Gabrielle is a licensed clinical social worker, consultant, coach, entrepreneur, and educator based in Sarasota, Florida. She has been in the mental health field for over a decade, specializing in stress, chronic health conditions, and trauma. After realizing her own burnout in 2021, she sold her thriving group practice and made it her mission to educate others about the impact stress has on our everyday lives. Gabrielle pulls from her experience as an EMDR and polyvagal informed therapist to utilize mind-body approaches to help others implement everyday strategies to manage stress and live their best lives. Gabrielle is an executive coach for the SBA Thrive program, international speaker, retreat leader, and has been featured in Authority Magazine, The Daily Bustle, and the Everyday Woman TV network. When she's not working, Gabrielle is teaching Zumba, surfing, or reading a psychological thriller at the beach. Today, we're going to talk about sound healing, how this helped her heal from burnout, and how it stimulates your vagus nerve, also known as the relaxation response. I actually met Gabby at a summit in Costa Rica, and I was able to have a sound healing with her. To be honest, I didn't really know what it actually was, but being ADHD, I saw the word healing and I was like, all right, let's give it a try. So welcome, Gabby.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this with you and your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So let's see. Do you want to start with your burnout story, which I think is important, and then we can jump into sound healing?
Yeah. So the first time I was burnt out, which I think I knew, but I didn't really know, is when I was working in child protective services. Like, no shock there that I got burnt
Right.
out from that job.
Right. Yeah.
But looking back, it's where a lot of, I think, bad habits started and a
Mm,
lot of health issues started. And I was working in a place where that was just kind of the culture. Like everybody
yeah.
was, on their work phone constantly and like working at night and working on the weekends. And,
Hmm.
all of us were just like eating fast food and had candy on the table.
Yeah, yeah. Typical
So,
community mental health experience.
yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And it was very also like community mental health. Like it was very toxic. They made me feel like I couldn't leave. And
Hmm.
I was in a very dark place, I remember at the end. And what pushed me to leave was actually my supervisor who had been there for like over 20 years. She left, she quit with no notice. She sent us
Mm.
all an email and she was like, I don't work here anymore.
Wow. Wow.
And
That
I
had
was
to get your
like,
attention.
I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit. Oh shit. And she was
Right.
like, her and my coworkers were like everything to me. And so I was like, well, if she can leave, then I can leave too. So
Yeah.
I did. And of course, I didn't really think about, all of those bad habits, like I mentioned, that had come from that. I just jumped right into the next thing, and
Yeah.
which was fine. It was a lot different. And I went from doing child protective services to being an in-home care manager for older adults. And I really loved that
Mm,
job. And it was
yeah.
stressful, but in a different way. I had to
Hmm.
drive a lot and I was still seeing a lot of clients. And so that was fine. They were doing a reduction in workforce. I moved into private practice. And of course, again, I'm like, I'm just going to have a little practice. It'll be like 15 clients a week. It'll be really relaxing and easy. But that's
Yeah.
just not how I
You
work.
don't work. You don't work that way. I don't think.
I
No.
do not. I'm always like, more, 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 more. What's the
Yeah.
next thing? How am I going to get challenged?
Hmm.
And that could also be the ADHD because I need my next dopamine hit.
Yes,
But
exactly. Yes.
so I grew my practice and I grew it really quickly because we saw mostly Medicare clients and there's not a lot of Medicare providers. And my
Right.
business model at the time was doing in-home counseling. So we
Hmm.
kind of the same thing I was doing with my previous job. And I got to like, of course, I was seeing like 28 clients a week. I have no idea how I was
Wow.
doing that,
No.
driving,
Uh-uh.
all driving to them all
Yeah.
over Denver.
Right. Right.
That happened. And then I expanded into a group practice. I hired one girl, she got full, hired the next person, and it just kind of grew from there. And it grew
Hmm.
really quickly.
Okay.
And it grew faster than I think I was able to handle it, which again,
Yeah.
this is 2020, of course. Hindsight's always
Mhm.
2020.
Sure. Yeah.
I remember just waking up one morning, this was in like 2021, kind of around the summer, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I
Mhm.
don't want to look at my phone. I do not want to see who texted me and who emailed me with a new problem or who quit
Right.
or what's happening with telehealth now and rates and
Hmm.
all of these things. And I just had a pit in my stomach and I was like, this is just
Yeah.
not it. This is not it.
Hmm.
So I sold my practice and completely changed my life.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. My early days in social work were home-based care as well. I didn't have the caseload you did. And so I sort of cherished the time in between clients of like car rides so I could like process and stuff like that. So I went into private practice. I'm like, you mean another client's coming in the door like right now? Like one just left and I have another one right now? Like,
Mhm.
where's my little leisurely car ride to the next
Yep.
house?
Yep.
Yeah, but that had to be stressful, just hurrying to get from one appointment to the next and all of those things. Yeah, and we
It
didn't
was
have we didn't have
stressful.
cell phones when I was doing it. So no one could reach me when I was in the car. So that was a
Oh my
plus for me.
God. That's amazing. That is totally a plus because that just, it's always even just, yeah, being totally like you're always connected and just adds on another layer of like even if I was in the car trying to relax between appointments, which I would do the same thing. That was like my decompression time. I would
Yeah.
usually have to use that time to call somebody, like call a client or
Yeah.
caregiver, or like I was still trying to work while I
Mhm.
was driving.
Yeah, yeah. Because there's not enough hours in the day. I just got a phone call right before we started recording from somebody that I need to call back right when we're done. And so it's, when you're working with humans, it's, you feel the pressure and the care that you want to be able to be there for them. And sometimes well, not sometimes, it's really easy to lose sight of the fact that we cannot be everything to everyone. And I
Yep.
think that we are sort of raised up that way in grad school that we sacrifice everything for the client. And that's just not
Mhm.
realistic at all.
Yep. I so
Yeah.
appreciate you saying that because that is, even though they tell you like, you want to empower the client to self-determination, but it's always like putting yourself last. I mean, I
Yeah.
think of so many times where like I had to do a removal, two removals in a row. I remember when I was a caseworker.
Oh, that's
And I
so hard.
remember it because it was the week before I got married. And I
Oh my
had to
gosh.
fly to fly these two
Wow.
kids with very significant behavioral issues that were definitely too much for me to handle
Uh-huh.
and
Right.
get them on a plane and fly them to California. And I remember
Wow.
my mom was like, isn't there somebody like, isn't that somebody else's problem? Isn't there a department that does that? And I was like, yeah, it's me.
Me.
I'm the one that has to
Exactly.
do that.
Yeah, yeah. And so not only is it the culture that we're raised, taught in grad school, but I think community mental health feeds into that completely. I've heard stories over and over from therapists like, I just didn't think they'd be able to function without me. They made me feel like they needed me. I was so vital. And you have to get to some breaking point before you realize, okay, well, they're just burning out one more person. It's a toxic way to work. There's lots of reasons why that is, but it's still not a great way to retain really good employees.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So one of the things that you discovered in relation to your burnout, I guess, is sound healing. Did that come from that?
It
Okay.
did, and that came from this second wave of burnout, which I think I am like pretty much on the other side of now. And it really probably started even before, like, I think I started really feeling it in 2021, but I think it started probably even in late 2019 when I look back. So I've been dealing with it for a while. I just, always push it to the side and, push through. But in probably around 2021 was the first time I really felt a pull to it. I had done sound baths before and I really liked them. But this time around, I was just feeling a bigger pull to do alternative things. Like I do go to therapy and I just felt like there was something else missing. And it was like there are all
Mhm.
these other tools available to us. And I went and I booked just a one-on-one, which I didn't even know you could do that. I thought it was just like sound baths and like people
Okay.
banging on bowls. And I
Right.
didn't really understand that sound healing can be used for so much more than that. I mean,
Mhm.
people use it for physical ailments and obviously emotional and mental things. And so I booked a one-on-one and, she kind of asked me a little bit about what I wanted from it. And I was like, I'm just kind of in a weird place in my life right now. I don't know what my next steps are. And it was amazing. Like it was an hour of complete relaxation. I remember telling her when we were finished, I was like, I like almost fell asleep and I was so relaxed. And, it's just, I don't know how I did that. And she's like, you don't have to do anything. The sound does
Yeah.
it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I had known what it was going into it, I would have been a lot more skeptical. I think I was really open-minded because I just didn't know what to expect. But I remember at one point feeling like I can't even feel my body on the couch anymore. Like I felt like I was floating, and that was mind-boggling to me. It was so amazing. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what sound healing is, how it works, that type of thing.
Yeah, so sound healing, again, sound has been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. We've been doing this in different religions and different cultures. And what we do in sound healing is we use different instruments. So a lot of times you see like the Tibetan bowls and the crystal bowls, but you can
Mhm.
use any instrument. There's gongs, I use chimes, drums, your voice. The
Mhm.
woman who I took my training with is a violinist, and so she plays the violin a lot in her
Oh,
sound
wow.
baths. She's really amazing. I'll have to send you her info.
Yes, absolutely. Wow.
Um, and we use all of these instruments to use the vibrations that come off of our body because our energy is everywhere. We're all vibrating. We
Right.
use different tones. Really, for relaxation is the main thing, but you can also use it for physical ailments as well. But we're basically just using the vibrations and the tones of the sound to heal.
Yeah, and you also at the summit you incorporated that into one of our. Well, I only went to one of the morning yogas.
Me too.
Okay, so you incorporated it into one of them then. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was a whole new experience. It was yoga, like yoga plus, right? That was
Yeah.
very cool. Hmm.
Yeah, I loved doing that, and that is just another way to relax and to take your mind off of things, and again, to stimulate your vagus nerve, bring you back to a sense of calm and well-being. And when we go deeper into it, there's also, we can use it to clear chakras or to fill in chakras that maybe are feeling a little low, that need more energy. You can use it for so many different things. And what I hear a lot from people is like, that's really woo woo, and I don't really like
Yeah.
think that that's a thing. And it is evidence-based and it is
Mm-hmm.
science. And
Mm-hmm.
I always show people this really amazing experiment that they did with sound where they put sand down and they play different vibrations and the sand moves into all these different patterns from the energy.
Ooh. Oh,
I'll send that
wow.
to you too. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to have that. Yeah. We can put those things in the show notes if people want to learn more about that. And you mentioned evidence-based, which kind of makes me roll my eyes because
Same.
we have so many things that we can use in our field that are so valuable and so helpful. And people are like, but is it evidence-based? And I'm like, well, the evidence is that I've got clients getting better. So do we,
Exactly.
yeah.
And healing is unique. And that's the other thing too. It's funny, I was just texting with a friend about this, about something totally different and something she's trying. And her son was like, well, did you look at the research? And she's like, the research doesn't apply to me because it's my unique experience.
Good
And
for her. I love that.
she's like, what? I said the same thing. I'm like, it's true. Like, what some white man experience is not the same thing
Mhm.
for me. So it's unique
Right.
to everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, well, for most of us, you're younger, so you knew about this longer than I did, but I just don't think most of us realize how much things are based on research done with white men.
Yes.
And once you understand that, you're like, I mean, even like medication doses, I'm like, really? This person weighs 100 more pounds than me, and we're going to take the same doses? That just make any sense to me. Or what
Hmm.
about their metabolism? Their metabolism might be different than mine, but we're all going to take the same dosage. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
crazy. Hmm.
Exactly. And it's unique. Like we are all different and we all
Yeah,
respond differently. So what works for exactly the person who is 100 pounds more than me might not work for me. Like, and just how
right.
we experience things is different. And so yeah, I could really go on a on a
Yeah.
tangent about evidence-based because I think it's bullshit, but
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just one of those things that we're sort of, brainwashed into thinking we have
Mhm.
to have that. So, yeah. Okay. So there's sound baths that people can go to. People can do one-on-one sessions. Like, is it something that you recommend? Like, I know some people that like once a month they get a massage because they know that that just really helps maintain their body. Is it something that people do sort of as needed, or is there a frequency you suggest, or is it sort of problem related?
I definitely recommend that you do it. I mean, you don't need to do it every day, but yeah, it would be good to add into kind of your wellness routine or whatever works for you. Because the more that we practice those relaxation techniques, the stronger
Mhm.
that response gets. And so, in turn, it's going to help with your stress response. It's going to help you have
Mhm.
greater psychological flexibility and emotional regulation if that relaxation response in your nervous system it starts to get stronger than the stress response. So if you can fit it in, like definitely at least once a month.
Okay.
But
And so is that with like YouTube videos? How do people access that if they want to do it daily?
you can do YouTube videos. There are Instagram. I do them on Instagram Live actually,
Okay.
and I save them. And there's
Okay.
tons of other people who do the same thing. TikTok, you can go to one live if you wanted to. Of course, that would be more expensive and, adds in travel time and everything.
Yeah.
But if you're just like, I just want to listen to some tones right now and just relax
Hmm.
myself, definitely go on YouTube or Insight Timer, and a couple other
Yeah.
apps have a lot of them that are really accessible. And even if you just put in your AirPods and you listen for just a couple minutes, it will do you some good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love Insight Timer. And I think that I mainly work with women who are ADHD like myself. And there's been a lot of pushback on trying to help people in the ADHD community understand that mindfulness and meditation really is helpful because it's so hard to learn And most people think like, oh, the first time you meditate, you do it for 10 minutes. And I'm like, no, let's start with like 3 minutes, and let's
Mhm.
start with
Yeah.
something that's going to guide you through, like you're not clearing your mind, but you're letting the thoughts, float through
Hmm.
and getting a lot of pushback. But the ones that will finally buy into it are like, wow, this is good, and
Yes.
our society is so busy anyway. Everyone, in my opinion, can benefit from some mindfulness and some
Hmm.
meditation.
And as somebody who, was just diagnosed with ADHD like less than a year ago, I have to
Mhm.
say that it has really helped me. And I was somebody in the past who was like, I don't have time to meditate. I don't do this mindfulness shit. Like, that's not for
Yeah.
me. And I have really changed so much in like the last probably 5 years, I would say.
Hmm.
And it does make a very big difference in helping me just regulate and be more in tune with my body because I notice for me that's a really big part of my problem. And I know that can happen with other people who are ADHD is that we're not paying attention to our body's
Right.
cues. And it helps me understand a little bit better what's happening and it helps me not go from 0 to 60 so quickly.
Right. Yeah. I'm just sort of processing everything you just said because I met you a couple of months ago and I can't imagine you being somebody that was just like, I don't have time for that bullshit. Cause I'm like that
I
you like
know.
seem to embody that to me. I'm like, that's who you are. I can't imagine like the pre Gabby before this.
Yeah, it's true. I have really made a lot of changes, and that's why it's so important for me to like go out there and talk about this because it has really changed my life for the better. The more that I practice this and the more that I make time for it. And I know that it's a lot and it feels like too much, and that's why it's really important that you just find what works for you. And so some people are like, I don't want to meditate. And I'm like, that's fine. Meditating doesn't necessarily mean that you're sitting, with no music and nothing and just sitting with your
Mhm.
thoughts. Like you can do it, make it work for you. You can go
Right.
for like a mindful walk or
Hmm.
sit outside or dance or do something. Like it looks different for everybody. So I just
Yeah.
want to say that just if you're listening and
Mm.
you're like, I don't like meditating. Well, you can make it work for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tend to use the car as a trigger for my clients because, everyone can relate to you get home and you're like, gosh, I don't even remember passing the 7-Eleven that I know I had to have passed to get to the house. And so, I'm like, okay, so now you're going to start like looking at the trees and thinking about what color green they are and, how many cars are around, what color are the cars, and can you smell, all the mindfulness things that we want to bring in. And the car is such an easy way to do that because I think it's
Hmm.
one of the ways where we're least mindful because we get in the car. I'm the person who gets in the car and sings really loudly because, you're invisible in the car and no one coming by
Yes,
can see how ridiculous
exactly.
I look. But I think the car is a good starting place for mindfulness for people.
I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, what type of training is involved for people, for clinicians who might want to start using some of this in their work? What type of training is involved?
So there are a lot of different options. I went through the Sound Healing Academy or
Okay.
Academy of Sound Healing, and they are based actually in the UK. But I did a lot of research because I was like, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it right. I don't want to, you can take that like $97 online course and call yourself a
Yeah.
sound healer.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not how I wanted to do it.
Might be a
So,
little lacking. Yeah. Okay.
yes,
I'm with you. I got
there
it.
is so much to it. Like, and I
Hmm.
only did level one, and they have two levels, and there's different types. Like, if you do level one with groups, and then you can do level two one-on-one or level two with groups. So it gets very in depth, and the teachers are incredible. And so the one I did, I chose to do it in person, and I was just lucky that it happened. There happened to be one in Sarasota, and there were people who came from Arizona and all other parts of the country to do it in person because
Hmm.
they're so credible. And it was over 3 days, and it was a
Okay.
lot. And then
Hmm.
after the 3 days, there's a whole online course that you have to watch, and then you have to do clinicals on three different people, like practice
Okay.
3 different times one on one, 3 different times in a group. And then you submit all of that, and then you can be a certified level 1 sound healer.
Okay.
And that just kind of gives you a good baseline, but you can definitely, if you're a therapist or like some other license, like a massage therapist or anything like that, you can definitely start using it one-on-one with clients and integrate it into the therapy room for sure.
Okay. All right. So what would that look like in integrating it into therapy? Because I know things like we're doing so much more non-Western stuff in therapy now. I know a lot of people that are incorporating yoga and lots of other techniques into their practice. So how would somebody use sound healing with their work?
So you could definitely do it as a grounding exercise
Okay.
and just to relax as a form of mindfulness. You could use it as a way to help people bring them back to their bodies. Like, where are
Hmm.
you hearing this? Where are you feeling this? You can use it as a way to like shake things up, even.
Hmm.
I'll show you an example, but
Okay.
like, if somebody's feeling anger, like, where do they feel it? Like, give them
Uh-huh.
these and like shake it
Yeah.
out.
Okay.
So where are you feeling it? So
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can integrate it. And that's probably how I would do it, but yeah, there's even more
Yeah.
to it than that.
Yeah.
But I think mostly just for understanding the body and coming back to the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah. I'm even imagining like client that comes in that's really stressed out, traffic was bad, or they've had a fight with their spouse and just helping them sort of get grounded into,
Hmm.
calm place to start the session, or for people who are doing really deep trauma work, using that
Yes.
towards the end to kind of get them centered so they can go back out into the real world. I really like that a lot.
Yeah, and even as like, if you are an EMDR therapist, like this is just another way of resourcing, right? Like
Hmm.
what helps you relax? How can you protect yourself? Can you use the bowls to protect yourself? Or, are there emotions that maybe you want to let go of and use sound healing to do that?
Okay. So earlier part of the description was let's talk about how to stimulate your vagus nerve. So that's kind of the premise of how this works, right?
Yes. So I'll just say really quick, just in case you're listening and you're like, what the hell is that? We all have one. So that makes up like 75 to 80% of our autonomic or automatic nervous system. And the vagus nerve is responding to your environment, essentially. So this also is your relaxation response, it's your fight or flight, like everybody kind of knows that, and it's your freeze response. So it's responding to everything that's happening in your environment, and it's sending off signals to you. If there is a threat where you feel unsafe in some way, you're going to get into fight or flight, and we probably all know what that feels like. So that's just like a very 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 high level
Yeah.
explanation. But when your vagus nerve is stimulated or engaged, that brings you back to kind of like your baseline. I think of it like we call it rest and digest. And that is where we are most connected to the world. We're grounded, we're compassionate, we're connected not just to the world, but to other people. We're able to, use the parts of our brain to make rational, logical decisions, which we can't do when we're in fight or flight. And
Right.
so you can stimulate your vagus nerve in a ton of different ways, but sound is one of them. And so,
Hmm.
again, like going back to that example, when I had my first one-on-one sound healing, I didn't have to do anything. I just laid there, and
Hmm.
she brought me into a very deep meditative state using
Yeah.
sound.
That's what I experienced with you. 'Cause I've never been in that type of a state with meditation that you and I achieved. And then I don't know if this is typical for everyone, but Gabby's very intuitive, and so she was actually visualizing things that were like so relevant to my life. And Gabby and I really didn't know each other. And
Yeah.
so, at the end she's like, "Are you a writer?" And I was just like, yeah, and a lot of she had me set an intention, and my intention was really, it was around my father and his recent death, and making sense of lots of different things about that. And my dad wrote textbooks for the courses he taught at a university, and writing is healing for me. So the last really significant piece I'd written was about my dad. And so when she when she said that to me, I was like, oh, now I'm going to cry.
Well, and that was very validating for me too, selfishly, because, that is a newer part of me that I'm tapping into, and we all have intuition. But that's, a newer thing that I've been just really trying to trust my intuition more. And when I have those visions or those feelings, I used to just kind of push them away, but now I'm trying to trust it. And so it
Wow.
was just amazing that like I had that vision of you writing, and writing is so meaningful for you.
Yeah, and you even said, or maybe it's just progress notes. I was like, thank God it's not progress notes. I hope that's not like the aura that I'm like projecting here.
No, that's me, right? Like I'm like, oh, I can't totally trust this. I have to make a joke out of it just in
Yeah.
case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that you're really making yourself vulnerable doing that. That's, especially if it's a newer thing that you're tapping into. I would think that that would be a little scary to throw that out there and not know how someone's going to respond.
Yeah, it is. And so I was like, I'm just going to try it. And Costa Rica
Hmm.
was really the first time where I just really leaned into that. And you were not the only one that had that experience. Like there were a couple other people who I
Oh,
did
that's
sound
so
healings
cool.
with, and the same thing. I was like, I had a
Yeah.
vision of this. Does that resonate with you? And it did.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, I love that so much. Okay.
yeah.
And you also can do this virtually, right? Because we were going to actually do like a little video in Costa Rica, but there was so much going on,
I
including,
know.
downtime in the pool and eating some really amazing meals, but we never got around to doing it. And so, so then I was asking, if people want to either do this with you or learn how to do it. But, there's still a lot of people out there who aren't really crazy about leaving the house a lot. Could see this
Mhm.
being really helpful for people with anxiety. So virtually
Yes.
is a way that people can access this.
Yes, and it's just as good virtually. I'm still able to tap in. You can still hear it quite well. And you just, it's helpful if you wear like headphones is the best
Okay.
way. But even sometimes people don't, and it still helps and it's still valuable to them. So yes, we do it virtually. I do one-on-ones virtually. I've done virtual sound baths. I do training for either one-on-one, but usually more for group practices on burnout
Mhm.
prevention and management. And I integrate
Yeah.
sound healing. I'm actually doing that one tomorrow.
Oh,
So
great.
yeah, it doesn't have to be in person. Obviously, I can't put the bowls on your body virtually,
Yeah.
but I can
Hmm.
imagine them, and that
Right.
works just as well sometimes.
Yeah. So I was a pre-pandemic adopter of telehealth, and when you tell people this, they're skeptical. They're like, I just don't see how that can work. They don't understand that you really can transfer energy virtually, that there's so much more connection. And actually, I find that for people who've experienced trauma, so much more safety being in their own space, that I've had clients that I know would have taken longer to really be ready to tap into their trauma experience. It would have taken longer in the office than it did in their own homes. So yeah,
Hmm.
there's power in this telehealth virtual thing that not everyone recognizes, I don't think, but everyone at least is familiar with it now because of the pandemic.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
mean, I've had that experience with clients too, doing telehealth. Like they're more
Mhm.
comfortable at home, even over the phone, which a lot of people don't agree with. But I've done a lot of phone sessions because not anymore, but previously. And I mean, I had amazing success doing phone sessions with a lot of our
Yeah.
elderly clients over the phone.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And with some of them, even during the pandemic, even if they had a smartphone, they didn't want to do a telehealth session. They wanted a phone session.
Hmm.
And we have, so much comes from our voices and the tone of our voice. And I imagine talking to you, the vibrations of our voice and all of those
Yes.
things. And so the eye contact is helpful, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary.
Hmm. Yes, it's so true. It can still be powerful.
Yeah. And so the Gabby was actually one of the, well, you were a keynote speaker, weren't you?
Not this
Or were you in
time,
one of the
but
breakup?
next
Okay.
time.
Yeah. Next time. Okay. Yeah. Well, it was a really powerful presentation on burnout and prevention, and not go take a bubble bath, but like truly tapping into what does this look like, how to deal with it, all of that kind of stuff that we still, you know the way that we try to prescribe self-care for people is really kind of ridiculous, and it's just a band-aid. And
Mhm.
so the things that you shared were really valuable. So I'd highly encourage anyone who
Oh,
has an opportunity to see Gabby's presentation to do that. It was very informative and insightful.
I appreciate so much that you were there and that you found it so powerful for you, because that's why I'm talking about it, because even a lot
Hmm.
of things that I read from therapists are like self-care, like get your nails done and go get a
Hmm.
massage. And those things are nice, and I love getting a massage, and a
Right.
massage
Yeah.
is one way that really does relax me. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm usually in a dark
Hmm.
room. Like, it is
Hmm.
stimulating my relaxation response, but
Hmm.
I can't get a massage in the middle of a stressful day. And so
Right.
understanding more about how you relax and how you can use those skills in times of stress and stretch that window of tolerance is really what self-care is. Self-care is regulating yourself.
Right, right. Yeah, and I'm all about normalizing things for therapists, because there's so many things that we experience. We are humans doing this work, and we are not taught to look at the humanness of ourselves when we're learning how to do this work. And so to normalize the things that people experience, like, are you behind on your progress notes? Okay, well, so are there 10 other people. So it's okay.
Mhm.
Take a deep breath and we'll make a plan, but it happens.
Yes.
But also burnout, and therapists get into really deep burnout, like crispy burnout. Like, I went through
Yes.
a period of time where I literally would be like, oh my gosh, this session is probably almost over, and it was 12 minutes into the session. I was so burnt out. I'm like,
Hmm.
12 minutes. That's that's a
Hmm.
crisis. That if
Yeah.
I'm 12 minutes into a session feeling like I should be wrapping it up, that's a problem. And so I think it's important for people to figure out what those, for me, a touchstone is when I'm looking at the clock earlier in a session. I'm like, okay, that's my cue that I need to start doing some more things for
Hmm.
myself, and really understanding that it's a normal part of our work. It's gotten so much worse, I think, for people since the pandemic, but it's part of what we experience, and we need to learn the tools to manage it along the way, and not wait till like what you did and what I've done, where you get to that breaking point where I could literally, my husband would look at me and I'd burst into tears I didn't
Yep.
even know why I was crying. I was just so exhausted. And so
Hmm.
recognizing that we can be proactive in preventing this.
Yeah, and we have to be, because our job is really hard. And
Yes, yes.
and it does creep up on you, and that's the thing about burnout, is it doesn't happen overnight. It's long-term stuff.
Right.
And so I love that you said that you have like these little touchstones that like if you're looking at the clock earlier, like maybe that is like an indicator that you need a break, or like things
Yeah.
need to change. Yeah, and I think again, we just need to be honest about it, because we are human. And I even shared this in my presentation that like I'm embarrassed about the things that I was doing, because I
Hmm.
wasn't a good therapist, and I was, looking at the clock, and I was multitasking sometimes during telehealth sessions, and I was just like not present. Like, I couldn't be
Hmm.
present for my clients, and I found that
Hmm.
my compassion was very low, and I was
Yeah.
very apathetic, and I don't
Hmm.
want to be an apathetic therapist. And so
Right.
that's
Yes.
why I did what I did, and I just needed a break, and I've pivoted, and
Yeah.
that's what's worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that, because the shame part of that, no one reaches out and shares the things they're shameful or feel shameful about, because they think they're going to be judged. And there's lots of
Hmm.
places where therapists show up where there's a lot of judgment happening. And
Hmm.
being able to be with a small group of therapists where you can say, okay, I kind of know these people, I probably can trust them. This is what I'm doing and I feel awful about it, and then having two other people say, gosh, I've been there, and it
Yep.
sucks, but it's not just you, it's the nature of this work. And so
Hmm.
this is a good indicator for you to, like, we need to take a step back and look at what you can do to take care of yourself better.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Gabby, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. So I do have this little question I've been asking everybody. Do you have a favorite catchphrase, metaphor, or analogy that you like to use in your work that you can share with us?
Yes. So my favorite kind of quote is perfection is the enemy of good enough. And
Hmm.
that helps me as an entrepreneur and,
Yeah.
putting myself out there. I love to remember that. And then an analogy that I use a lot, or I guess it's, no, I guess it's an analogy. Is it a metaphor? Either way, when I'm explaining neuroplasticity to people, something that I like to do is, and this is again just quickly, I won't go into too much detail, but I say like our brain is like a big meadow full of grass. And, if you want to create a new pathway, like maybe some more gratitude or mindfulness or meditation, you have to bend down that grass, but it doesn't happen the first
Yeah.
time, right? You have to
Hmm.
keep walking that path to
Yeah.
make that grass flat so that you know that that's the trail, that's the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's so much easier for people to catch on to things like that when they can really visualize it. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, I really enjoyed talking to you today, Gabby. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. Please tell the listeners where they can find out more about you, what you have to offer, how they can connect with you, all that kind of stuff.
I am what they call multi-passionate. So I do
Yay.
a couple of different things. I consult on Medicare. So if you are interested about that, it's Medicare Consulting for Therapists.com, and it's the same on Facebook. I also do retreats, training, consulting on burnout prevention and management, and also help people how to scale and sell their businesses. And all of
Mhm.
that info is GabrielleJuliano-Villani.com.
Great. Okay. And we'll put those things in the show notes as well so people can access that easily.
Thank
For everyone
you.
listening, there are new episodes of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast released every Thursday on all major platforms. Please remember, our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Bye bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to colleaguedownthehall.com, where you'll be able to learn more about getting the clinical support you need and resources to help you work in a supported, sustainable way. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your therapy friends and colleagues. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you love this episode, please leave a review.